But to say there's going to be this sort of, white label crypto experience and this more broad approach from companies like Apple, I don't think that's an outrageous thing to see in the next 3 to 4 years. I think now, as we get these grassroots approaches in, companies are going to see that there is a large demand for this, and technically it's pretty easy to do. And when we talk about Solana and the Solana phone and the capabilities that just having a key ring natively in the phone provides, iPhones already do a lot of that with your Face ID technology and with your fingerprint and different ways of having a secure seed phrase. And then so now how do we extend that experience up into these apps natively?
Welcome to part 2 of my interview with Alan of Quai Network. On this episode, I asked Alan about his time at Apple and what are the odds of Apple embracing crypto. We also talked about some of the projects that would be building on Quai Network, and his answer may surprise you. And then thirdly, we also talked about the types of narratives that Alan is looking out for in crypto. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and it'll help support the show and the guests. Thanks so much for tuning in and enjoy this episode with Alan of Quai Network.
The other thing that I would like to understand is different chains attract different types of applications. So certain chains, because of how much TPS they attract games, for instance, because there's just a lot of transactions happening at once, and those transactions, they try to minimize the cost. And some chains attract more DeFi applications just because they tend to be a little bit more secure. Where do you feel like you're getting a lot of your builders' interest?
Great question. And so with Quai, as I've alluded to, we want it to be a general purpose layer. So a foundational platform to have a monetary base and something that can be used as money in payments, games, DeFi, NFTs. And I think when these chains build out this go-to-market strategy, or they build out this category that they're in, and they're like, we're only going to be games, we're only going to be DeFi, we're only going to do this. I think it's a bit of a fool's errand, because if you build a blockchain and it's public and it's open and truly permissionless, you can't stop what people build. And so now you're technically building this corner, as opposed to that's just your go-to-market strategy and your BD approach to only getting games, because you think you have some interesting competitive edge there in terms of your team and your relationships and your connections, and also maybe the area in which that you see is going to grow the most in terms of broad crypto adoption. But to say one chain can be specifically this thing may not work out, because ultimately you want things to be cross sectors. So I want my DeFi to interact with my NFTs, as we've seen in some ecosystems in regards to fractionalization and lending and borrowing. And then I also want that to be integrated into games. So I want to maybe use my Pudgy Penguin in a game that I'm playing on a chain or a network of chains. And so we see that all being synergistic together, because they're not in isolation, and a blockchain platform should be able to serve all of these. And how do we get all of these categories to scale enough in which we have sufficient users and adoption and the sort of cross-pollination of these decentralized assets? And I think that even goes back further, where if we're going to go, especially into the game sector, of owning these assets, like I think the traditional example is like Call of Duty skins and CSGO skins, and owning those and being able to monetize those and trade those, then who's to say you can't do all these wacky things in the future where, those are NFTs and you're playing them in a game, and then you can do interesting things with DeFi and create these markets. And so everything fundamentally on a blockchain, I think, is the programmable nature of just all of these categories. And so to say it's one thing, I think, again, is limiting what blockchain is able to do. And so for Quai, we want to build the most ubiquitous layer that can serve all of these in the most scalable way and the most resilient way as well. Because just in a way in which I wouldn't want the network to go down because I'm trying to send money as remittances and across the border, well, I wouldn't want it to go down when I'm playing a game and I'm on a 30 kill streak and I'm going to get a nice NFT at the end of it. So I think being able to handle all of those use cases are equally as important.
It would be interesting to see when the big players like Call of Duty, you mentioned. I'm a big fan of Call of Duty. It's my way of catching up with some of my friends. I'll hop on every once in a while. It'd be interesting to see when it gets to the point where those guys feel like, okay, we need to jump in, because if we don't, kind of like the banks, right? You got to twist their arm, because it's the market decides where the demand is. And so reaching that level is going to take some work. Who knows if it'll happen this cycle or next, but it's exciting to talk about these things, because eventually, you imagine that's going to come down the pipe.
Are you a Warzone multiplayer?
I'm a Warzone guy. Yeah. I'm a Warzone guy.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine. I know, Avalanche is innovating there, so they have games that are focusing on that and like an extraction-based approach. And so, but again, I think that's a BD strategy. And it's just that's where you can focus your resources because these games ultimately too, just as DeFi projects are going multi-chain, they'll go multi-chain. And so, I think the de facto thing in the Ethereum ecosystem for some time was you're going to have your large NFTs on Ethereum, but then those microtransactions might happen on Polygon or Arbitrum or some other chain. And so, imagine if there was a good enough experience where that's all one place and you don't have to worry as a developer about all these chains, and eventually these games will build that out and get it into the Xbox store and get it into the PlayStation store, and I think that's just a matter of time.
I agree. Alan, I want to transition a little bit because you mentioned that you used to work at Apple, so you have a little bit of insight into their perception about Web3 and what's happening in this industry. How far away are we from having Apple like fully embrace Web3?
Yeah, so I think they were caught up a little bit on their Vision Pro. So they're just getting to Metaverse. And so we were like 3 years past Metaverse, right? So it might take a little bit of time. In terms of my experience there, it's a big company. There's a lot of people and a lot of different ideas. And traditionally, the way Apple works is they keep things siloed and they keep teams isolated. But to say there's going to be this sort of, white label crypto experience and this more broad approach from companies like Apple, I don't think that's an outrageous thing to see in the next 3 to 4 years. And I think it's because now we're seeing this institutional adoption. We're seeing these larger regulatory bodies almost get steamrolled by these communities and by these projects because they don't have the technical savvy on how to compete. They don't have the fundamental understanding, I think, as you mentioned with Gary Gensler and proof of stake versus proof of work and these different technical pieces. I mean, I think he was on CNBC like the other day saying Bitcoin is centralized because it's traded on a centralized exchange. And so I think now as we get these grassroots approaches in, companies are going to see that there is a large demand for this. And technically, it's pretty easy to do. And when we talk about Solana and the Solana phone and the capabilities that just having a key ring natively in the phone provides, iPhones already do a lot of that with your Face ID technology and with your fingerprint and different ways of having a secure seed phrase. And then so now how do we extend that experience up into these apps natively? So I think for them, it's a pretty easy toss-up. And other developers and other people should maybe start to look into that experience and how that can evolve into the app layer.
Yeah, I personally feel like they are the key component to mass adoption because so many people around the world have an iPhone.
Yeah, I mean that, and then Android as well. I know Android's a little more plug and play, and so there's a lot of ways that people can adapt those systems and bring crypto into it. But the actual use case is the same as having a password manager, is the same as having something that just verifies that this device is doing that with that information that's publicly available. I think it's a lot better than the route that we're going down in which we don't get to own our data. And it's stored in a database that we can't control, we can't sign and verify. It can be utilized to train AI models on the future of behavior and actually is a net negative for society versus allowing people to tap into what they own and ensure that they have sort of the provenance and the understanding of how that data is used. I think that's an interesting point in which these large companies can decide, what's best for these users. And we've seen actually Meta take that approach in regards to their AI models of competing with Apple on the Vision Pro. I'm not sure if you saw Zuckerberg like 2 days ago saying that they want to be the open version of the sort of metaverse experience there as opposed to the closed version. And so, it may be unlike Apple to embrace something that is open and as accessible as blockchain. So I think there's a lot of areas to innovate there. And unfortunately, the iPhones have a big moat and a lot of vendor lock-in. But if people demand that experience enough and it is competitive to an iPhone, people will move.
You mentioned AI. We also earlier touched on gaming. What do you think is going to be that one vertical that is going to, I guess I'll use the word explode, just in growth and user adoption within the next year or so? Yeah.
So, man, these are all loaded because all of these are such a flash in the pan from like all of the different things. And the actual developments around these are tough to actually track because they've been around. So now it's just like, when do people put the eyes on the things that have been around versus something else that's hot at the time? And touched on the two. So AI and gaming, I think that sets up a huge narrative. I would say Quai benefits greatly from both of those, given our work-based solution is GPU-based. And so there's a lot of interesting dynamics that can occur with offloading GPUs whenever they're not being used for AI to secure Quai Network, and same with gaming. So if you have your Call of Duty rig at home and you're not playing Warzone, you can mine Quai and have it contribute to the security of the network. So there's a lot of interesting things at play there. I would say right now, the biggest thing would just be that institutionalization of crypto and ensuring that it becomes more broad and ubiquitous as an asset. And we pretty much go through these 4-year cycles where everyone's like, crypto is going to be huge and it's going to reach all these markets, and then it actually just gets convoluted into these sort of more niche things of like, oh, it's just for AI, it's just for gaming, it's just for NFTs, it's just for DeFi. And we haven't actually got to that point yet where people are like, okay, crypto is money. Like, it is this thing that holds value and is competitive to these large asset classes, and it's competitive to these, more traditional baskets of commodity-based goods. So I would say that's the thing that I'm excited about, is just being treated more fairly as an institutional asset class, and ensuring that you get those sort of checkoffs that can move it to the next level of integrations and more broad things, so that it makes it easier for it to be an AI play or a game play, or brought into these other different use cases that it can fulfill.
Definitely exciting times ahead. Alan, I really had a great time talking to you. You must have a lot of conviction in what you're building to leave something like Apple to start your own company and trailblaze just on your own. It takes a lot of grit, conviction, confidence, all the above. So looking forward to following along on your journey, and hope to have you back on and give us an update on Quai Network. Any parting thoughts for the listeners?
Yeah, so we're in testnet right now, and we're launching mainnet this summer. We're actively building the community, so there are many ways to participate and engage. You can follow us on Twitter @Quai Network. You can check out the Galaxy space and earn some Quai ahead of mainnet. And then, of course, join the Discord and hang out in general. Run your own node, run a miner, participate in the network, and see what we're building. I think those are the main ways to contribute. And as you said, it's been a great time talking with you today, and I look forward to being on in the future.
Absolutely, Alan. I'll be sure to include those links in the description. Thanks again for your time, and until next time.
Awesome. Catch you later.